Hey guys, welcome. It is the first video cast for Chapter 10 on personality. We're going to be mostly focusing on Freud in this first chapter, so let's get started. Remember Freud from our first chapter? We're going to dig more into that. So personality, there's a lot of different definitions of personality. Some of them involve this concept of consistency, and others involve this concept of continuously changing process shaped by our individual needs and cognitions, by external pressures from social environment. Your textbook takes an incredibly diplomatic approach and says a person's characteristic pattern of thinking, feeling, and acting. So it doesn't indicate whether or not this thing is developed early on in life and stays stable, consistent, or whether or not it's a constantly evolving process. So I want to ask you that question. Is personality something that you develop early on in life and that's that guiding force throughout the rest of your life? Or is personality something that's constantly evolving? All right, we have two main theories of personality. We've got the psychodynamic theories, and within this is psychoanalysis, which is Freud's theory, and that's what we're going to focus on is psychoanalysis. But there are lots of other theories that stemmed out of Freud and tweaked it a little bit here and there for their own interest and arguments. But Freud's focus is on motivation. Remember, we had a whole chapter on motivation, and Freud really focuses on that. His interest in the personality is what motivates us to behave. And then there's the humanistic theory, and this theorem says is that the present subjective reality, what we believe is important now, what we think of ourselves in relationship to others is important now. So it focuses on the now, and Freud's theory focuses on the then. All right, we've got the clinical perspective of psychology, and in the clinical perspective, their view of personality is that it's not just psychodynamic or humanistic, it's both together. So it's a very harmonious merger of the two. So there's the clinical perspective, which is a focus on clinical practice and actually helping people who are seeking counseling. And then we have the social cognitive theory, which is derived from experiments in science. So this is the research portion of psychology. And this is based on the idea that personality is a result of learning, perception, and social interaction. But despite what it seems like that these two are polar opposites, they're actually not. They merge well together and they complement each other. If you think about it for a minute, I bet you can see how they actually merge with each other. All right, psychodynamic theories. There's a variety, like I said, but Freud's is called the psychoanalytic theory, and the rest are called psychodynamic, so as not to confuse them with Freud. People who build off of Freud and make psychodynamic theories are called neo-Freudians. In this theory, Freud says the unconscious, the hidden parts of the mind, is a source of powerful impulse, instinct, motive, and conflicts that energize personality. So let's get into that a little bit more. So it's the psychoanalysis, the focus on how the mind's energy is exchanged, transformed, and expressed. We've got three different parts of that mental stream. And so the mental stream of the sex drive is called the eros. It's not really just a sex drive, it's all of your drives and natural urges to feed, to sleep, to protect oneself, for safety, for shelter, but also especially sex. And Freud really focused on sex and believed that sex was a very strong dominant factor, which is why he attributes not only eros, the Greek god for passionate love, to this mental stream for sex, but also derives the motivator, the libido, which is Latin for lust. And this motivator motivates us to act on that sexual drive. Then we also have another mental stream for destruction. These are the most basic elements of the human being. And it's also known as the thanatos, which means death instinct. And this is where our aggression and destructive behaviors come in. Our risk-taking behavior is derived from this area as well. All right, remember the iceberg when we started at the beginning of this year? So we've got three different conflicting personalities, if you will, in the mind. We have the id, and this is where the eros and the thanatos are. They're very instinctual urges, so and with an emphasis for Freud on sexual urges, but all of our urges are here. Then we have a superego, and this is our learned experience of what society expects or what's dangerous. And this guy is always saying to the ego, now calm down, we can't do that right now, that's not appropriate right now, it's not the time for it, or I think we'll get in trouble, or this will be dangerous. So superego is always concerned about what is right and what's wrong. And then we have the ego, And he kind of exists in between these two. The id and the superego are always battling like this, and the ego is sort of the logical voice of reason in your conscious mind that comes in between the two of them and says, hey, hold on, guys. And most often the ego is making compromises between what you know to be right and what you really want in life. And so the ego is saying, well, you had a Diet Coke, so then we can have the ice cream. But if you have a regular pop, we can't have the ice cream. All right, so, and then once again, there's your conscious mind above the water. Remember, the pre-conscious mind was right here, so your superego is in that pre-conscious mind, and it's a place where you can derive, pull those memories. So if I ask you when your birthday is, you're not thinking about it right in this moment, but it's right on the surface, right where you know exactly where it is, and that's where your superego is. Whenever you need to draw from it, it's there. And then your id is in the unconscious mind where you cannot draw from it, you cannot grab it. But it's there, it's underlying, and it's usually your most natural instincts and urges. All right, so I just described all these things. Pause the video for a minute as I scroll through them, and you can write down all of this info if you'd like to. It's very good information. All right, the psychosexual stages. Before we do the psychosexual stages, I want to skip through and go to defenses, ego defenses. So what often happens, and according to Freud, is that your id and your superego are constantly at odds, are constantly fighting one another for power, right? Your id wants what it wants, and your superego doesn't want to get in trouble. So your ego is sitting right in the middle between these two, kind of pushing them back, like, hold on, guys, whoa, defending them off. That gets exhausting. So your ego develops a lot of anxiety about this entire process. And then what it does to counter the anxiety is develop defenses. And there are many different defenses, and they're all related to different things, and different things we want to admit, and the balance between the id and the superego. Here are a couple of them. Repression. This is the ego defense that excludes unacceptable, inappropriate thoughts and feelings from our awareness. We push out things we don't want to acknowledge that we think about and we feel. Regression, this is when you revert to childlike behavior, right? If your parents tell you something you don't want, you stomp your feet, you scream and shout, you stomp off to your bedroom and slam the door, that would be regression. That would be you acting like a child. Rationalization, this is generating self-justifying explanations to hide the real reasons for our actions, right? So rationalization you can often think about as like a boy pushing a little girl on the playground. He really likes her, right? But no, that's not the right example here. The right example here would be explanations to hide the real reasons of our actions would be the ice cream example again. So you want some ice cream, and so what you say is, well, I haven't eaten today, so ice cream's okay. It's okay that I wasn't admitted to the team because they're losing this year anyhow. They're a bad team. Sublimation, channeling unacceptable impulses into acceptable activities. So this is when you're really angry about something, like say you broke up with your girlfriend, and this causes you to channel all of that energy into your favorite sport, in this case practicing curling, right? You head out to the rink and you practice your curling, get all that energy out that way. So there's a complete list of ego defenses on page 483 in the textbook. You really need to write them down. You need to know them. Okay, let's get through these psychosexual stages and then we are done today. All right, so the psychosexual stages are Freud had, just like developmental stages, Freud had developmental stages, but he focused on the personality and development of the personality during physical developments. So the oral stage, this is a fixation on all things oral, right? Sucking, biting, chewing. The task here is to feed and learn how to eat and to feed. The anal stage, funny, haha. Pleasure focuses on the bowel and the bladder elimination. Why it's called the anal stage, still, I know, hilarious. But this is coping with demands for control. Learning how to control one's biological urges helps one to control one's mind and control the world around them, and that sort of concept. So there's a focus on potty training here. The phallic stage, this is pleasure zone, is in the genitals. So if you think of each one of these, the libido, Eros's motivator for sexual drive, the libido, is in the mouth. The libido is in the anus. The libido is in the genitals, right? So this is coping with incestuous sexual feelings. So this is our first understanding of sex and what that is. And Freud believed that if you are a boy, you fell in love with your mother at this stage. And so you would mimic your father in order to get your mother's attention. And if you were a girl, you fell in love with your father at this stage, and so you would mimic your mother in order to get your father's attention. And he credits this stage with you developing sexual identity, male, female, gender identity. Latency. This is, your sexual feelings are dormant in this time period. This is why it's called latency. It's kind of on a hiatus. And this is from age 6 to puberty, and this is where you're just learning how to play and learning how to exist in your realm. And then genital, this is from puberty and onward. This is the maturation of your sexual interests, and this is where you develop actual sexual relationships outside of the home. So this is a horribly ugly side. I do apologize for that, but let's dig into it. This is more notes for myself. So a fixation, according to Freud, is a lingering focus of pleasure-seeking energies at an earlier psychosexual stage in which conflicts were unresolved. So what that means is Freud is saying that during one of these stages, you did not do what you needed to do, or you didn't get enough, or you got way too much. And because of that, you're now focused on that stage, on that deficiency that you have. So let's look at each one. So an oral fixation. Your task is feeding at this stage. If you're fed too little, too much, you have an oral fixation later on in life. You may be constantly focused on dieting, or you may be constantly overeating. Your anal stage, the task is on potty trained. If you're not potty trained, or potty training is too focused on being absolutely perfect at it, you might develop anal retention, which is becoming a control freak, right? You're incredibly neat, you need to control everything. Or anal expulsive, which is being really messy and doing whatever you want, not really caring about society's expectation. Then there's phallic fixation. Freud would say your libido is in your genitals at this stage, and your task is to form sexual identity. So you're supposed to understand that you're a boy or a girl and who you're supposed to be sexually fixated on. And there are various issues if you didn't learn to identify with the proper parent, and you struggle with relationship and sexual intimacy your whole life as a result of not developing well in the phallic stage. The latency stage, this is just time to play. The libido takes a time out. You go sit and sits in the corner. There's no fixations or problems. You're just learning how to get along in your society. And then the genital stage, there's no fixation development here. You do not develop fixations here. What this is where all of your fixations actually represent. They come out. So if you were deficient in any one of these areas previously in your life, then they will come out here in your inability to develop mature relationships, sexual intimacy, that sort of thing. Now, one last thing here. Here's some of the complexes. We've heard of an Oedipus complex. That's a boy in love with their mother. And this happens if you don't develop your identity well enough in the phallic stage, or you stay in the phallic stage. Identification, boys love their mom, identify with their dad. So that is the healthy identification in that stage. Penis envy, this is where girls want to be like their fathers, and so they feel deficient because they don't have a penis. There's also womb envy, where boys wish they had a womb. That is all for today, guys. That's Psychosexual, that's Freud, and that's our first video cast for this unit. So I'll see you next time. We'll talk about humanistic theories.